Hey everyone, my name's Zayas, and today I'm here to review Grappler Baki. Baki is a martial arts slash shonen slash action manga written by Keisuke Itagaki back in 1991 to 1999 in the weekly Shonen Champion magazine. Prior to this, Itagaki did do one manga which had some potential. Just for those unaware, this is the first of 5 Baki parts, and this was written before Baki had a ton of side stories, anime adaptations, and sequels. It can be a little confusing getting into Baki because for the longest time, all of these 5 parts weren't translated, so you would have to read it out of order. And along with that, a lot of people don't know the order, so I'll just go over it really quickly. It goes from Grappler Baki to New Grappler Baki, into Baki Hanma, into the Baki Do with Musashi, and then the Baki Do with the sumo guy. Baki puts the battle into battle shonen, and it's pretty unsurprising that Baki became this popular. It's filled with raw action, with intense, fast-paced, and vivid fights. The most unique part about Baki is that some of these fights are actually based off of fighters in real life, and they use their techniques to some degree. And partly this is because Itagaki has done his research, and partly this is because he also has somewhat of a martial arts background, alongside with having served in the army for a period of time. Of course, a lot of this is still complete fantasy and makes little sense, such as the image training that Baki does, such as having perfect teeth to increase your fighting power, alongside with perhaps the most strangest one, a martial artist being able to retract his balls into his body. Despite some of the unrealistic stuff, this training that people do, the physiques that they have, and the feats they're able to accomplish is actually strangely realistic. A lot of these are based off of weightlifters, bodybuilders, and a lot of what you see actually today has been broken, but probably back then it was probably pretty hard to break a lot of these records since there was less steroids. The protagonist himself isn't really anything special. He is quite literally just a 17-year-old kid and exhibits traits that you would see in a 17-year-old kid. I don't think there's too much that really needs to be said about him other than the fights he partakes in. Which brings us to the first few fights in Baki, which are actually kind of a little disappointing. If you're just picking this series up and you don't get to like the 100 chapter mark, I wouldn't be surprised because the fights in the beginning aren't very memorable, the characters don't have that interesting techniques, and the character design is just lacking. I would say it's pretty much until Yujiro versus Doppo that we get the first real good fight. And until then, it's just a bunch of people that I pretty much forgot about by the time I got to the end of the Baki series. We then follow up with a training arc with Baki, which happened before, and we also get to know the character a little bit better. But sadly, the characters are still pretty one-dimensional at this point. There's not much really to know about these characters other than having one motive. It is also here where we first learn how bad Itagaki is at writing female characters. And this will haunt him all the way into New Grappler Baki until I think he realizes that he should not draw in any more female characters. And I'm glad that he doesn't as much anymore. Baki versus Hanamiya is sort of where Baki starts to really sort of get good. The character designs are a lot better. Hanamiya is a very memorable character. He has a lot of character personality to him. He has cool techniques. He's apparently loosely based off of someone in real life. And I didn't know this until later, but he's also referenced in Shamo, the same person. And Hanamiya is just a beast. Yujiro will be a character who came before Hanamiya, who's pretty cool. But I also think Yujiro wasn't in his full form right from the start. I think the character design had been improved throughout the course of like the 200 chapters that he was drawn. And of course, in all the way into New Grappler Baki and Hamna Baki, they improved even more, making him an even better character. Hamna Baki is also sort of where characters get to like sort of really have personalities. Right now, the characters don't have much complexity to them at all. But I think in terms of the character design, they do have a lot going there. There's a lot of weight. There's a lot of gravity behind these characters. There's a lot of intimidation behind these characters. I really love what he did. At the start of the tournament arc is when the art style really starts to get good. You can definitely see the similarities to Fist of the North Star and JoJo's. However, I think a lot of this is just based on real life and realism. Hamna Baki is also when characters like Yujiro and Baki start to develop more personality. So far in Grappler Baki, they really are very one-dimensional. But The character designs themselves are actually getting to be quite good by the end of the series, with Yujiro looking a lot better, Baki looking a lot better, and there being tons of other memorable characters such as Jack, such as Hanamiya, such as Doppo. Baki also jumps on the battle tournament hype after many other series popularized it, such as Dragon Ball Z and Yu Yu Hakusho. However, Baki also has tons of influence throughout its course on other series such as Kengan Omega and Record of Ragnarok. Jack went from a character that I thought was sort of going to lose in a 1 round or 2 rounds to becoming one of my favorite characters in the series. And I love how violent this guy is. I love how primal he is. He has a ton of weight behind him as well. He's tons of scars. Really cool character design. I think on top of that, there's also the fact that his character is literally just a guy who just took a ton of steroids. And this is a very taboo subject in the manga industry, but I love that he went out there and took the risk and did it. The tournament arc introduced a ton of great characters, and it's kind of where the story starts to get really, really good. And there are characters introduced here, such as Retsu, who becomes a staple in the Baki series later. There's characters introduced such as Katsumi, who's also a staple. There's characters like Shiba, who comes back multiple times. There's just tons of great faces. The only character that I didn't really like that kind of has reoccurring appearances is Goki. I kind of feel like he doesn't have the same aura as a lot of the other fighters do. He doesn't have the same cool factor, even though he's not bad. But there are some forgettable fighters introduced in this arc, but I think the onslaught of good fight after good fight after good fight sort of makes up for a couple of forgettable characters here and there. Speaking of forgettable characters, Itagaki actually introduces one of the more forgettable characters in the series here, Mike Tyson, who you would sort of expect to be a big name of some sort. But I think Itagaki sort of has a vendetta, some sort of petty feelings towards Americans, I think. At least that's how I see it. And he really hates boxing. And even though in this scenario it doesn't really affect the story, I think in New Grappler Baki, he actually is so petty that the story actually gets hurt a little bit because of how much he hates Americans. The last fight in the series is actually sort of my favorite fight, and pretty much stays my favorite fight all the way until Baki Hanma, which is pretty crazy. The fight is fast paced, there's a lot of action, there's actually a pretty big twist, which I did not expect the first time I saw this, which is pretty, for an author like Itagaki to pull off a big plot twist is pretty great. The fight is just non-stop, and I love it. Also, I have no idea why he felt it was necessary to include that the audience got sprayed with sweat, tears, and piss. I felt as if that was maybe a little unnecessary, just a little bit. A lot of people might be disappointed, and I was a little disappointed that we didn't get to see the Baki Yujiro fight at the end of the series, but he gave me a fight that was pretty much as good as it could be, and I don't think a one-sided slaughter would be any better than this fight. Overall, I'm feeling a light to decent 7. Overall, the series was pretty good, but it did have some significant flaws at the start of the series. Like, subscribe, comment, anything to help the channel. Thanks for the support. I will be reviewing Takemitsu Zamurai next, and after that I'll be reviewing Goodnight Punpun. So stay tuned for that, and thank you everyone.